Everyone is asking the wrong questions. They analyze my speed, how fast I strike, measuring it down to fractions of a second. They break down my movements, trying to understand the physics behind every punch, every kick, every dodge. They watch my fights, re-watch my training footage, and take notes on my techniques, hoping to uncover some hidden secret. They measure my power, how much force I generate with each strike, how far I can send an opponent flying with just a single punch. They analyze the angles of my attacks, the positioning of my feet, and the explosive energy behind my movements, as if finding a formula will allow them to replicate my results. They study my training, how many hours I spend practicing, how many repetitions I do, how much discipline I have. They want to know exactly how I push my body, what exercises I follow, how I condition my muscles, how I develop my endurance. They believe that if they copy my routine, they will achieve the same results. But they are missing the most important point. Mastery is not about what you do. It's about how you think. I once had a student who was completely obsessed with training. He was dedicated, disciplined, and relentless. Every day he showed up early, ready to train harder than anyone else. He memorized every technique I taught him, practiced each movement thousands of times, and followed my training regimen to the letter. He even copied my diet, my sleeping patterns, and my daily routines, believing that this was the key to becoming great. And yet, despite all his hard work, something was missing. He never asked questions. He never challenged what he was learning. He never stopped to think about why we practiced certain techniques, why we moved a certain way, or why a particular method worked better than another. He focused only on doing, on perfecting the movements exactly as I showed him, never realizing that true mastery isn't about copying. It's about understanding. And that is why he never became great. Because real mastery isn't about repeating what others do. It's about breaking free from the limitations of imitation and discovering your own path. It's about questioning everything, testing everything, and discarding what doesn't work. True mastery isn't about blindly following instructions. It's about developing the mindset to evolve beyond them. In 1964, I faced a challenge that would change everything. A traditional martial artist came forward, claiming his style was superior. He was certain that his techniques, passed down through generations, represented the ultimate form of combat. It wasn't just about him. This was the mindset of nearly every martial artist at the time. They clung to their styles, believing that tradition alone made them strong. People expected a fight. They wanted a clash of techniques, a duel where the winner would prove that his system was the best. They saw it as a simple competition between two opposing styles, a physical battle where one fighter's discipline would triumph over the others. But I didn't just fight. I did something far more dangerous. I questioned the very foundation of martial arts itself. As the fight unfolded, it became clear that something was wrong. My opponent was skilled, but he was bound by his system, restricted by the rules he had trained under for years. Every move he made followed a pattern, a sequence he had practiced countless times. But real combat isn't predictable. Real combat isn't controlled. It's fluid, chaotic, ever-changing. And his system had no answer for that. The problem wasn't his skill, it was his mindset. He was trapped in the idea that fighting had to follow a structured form, that techniques had to be executed in a specific way, that his tradition would protect him. But reality doesn't respect tradition. A fight doesn't care about your lineage, your certificates, or the philosophy behind your movements. It only cares about one thing: what works. That day, I exposed something deeper, something far more important than a single victory or defeat. I revealed the truth that most martial artists were too afraid to face. Styles are limitations disguised as knowledge. For years, I had seen martial artists train within rigid systems, memorizing movements, repeating forms, and following rules without ever questioning them. They believed that mastering a style meant mastering combat, but all they were doing was memorizing a script. And the problem with scripts is that they fall apart the moment reality doesn't follow the plan. Most people train within a system. They follow a structured path, believing that mastery comes from perfecting the techniques that were handed down to them. They think that if they train hard enough, if they repeat the same movements enough times, they will become unbeatable. But I trained to destroy systems. Most people defend traditions. They hold on to the past, convinced that what worked before must work now. They refuse to question, refuse to evolve, because they fear letting go of what they have always known. But I questioned everything. That's why Jeet Kune Do was never a style. It was never meant to be another fixed system, another collection of techniques, another set of rules for people to follow. It was something entirely different. It was a shift in mindset, a break from the belief that there is one correct way to fight, one right way to move, one ultimate system that has all the answers. It was about breaking free. The fight that day didn't just change my approach to martial arts. It changed how I lived my life. I stopped seeing styles, traditions, and rigid systems as paths to mastery. I saw them for what they truly were, cages. And the only way to reach true mastery was to break out of those cages, to strip away everything unnecessary, to test everything in reality, and to keep only what truly worked. That moment wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about opening people's eyes to a truth they had never considered. Mastery isn't about memorizing more techniques or following more rules. It's about questioning everything, discarding what doesn't work, and never allowing yourself to be trapped by limitations disguised as knowledge. Here's the greatest mistake people make. They focus on how to do something instead of why they are doing it in the first place. They become obsessed with mastering techniques, memorizing movements, and perfecting forms without ever stopping to ask the most important question: is this the best way? They chase knowledge, but they don't seek truth. Knowledge can be handed down, memorized, and repeated. Truth, on the other hand, must be discovered, tested, and proven. Truth is not found in tradition alone. It is not found in blindly following what came before. It is found in questioning everything and stripping away what does not work. I remember an encounter that made this clear to me. I was speaking with a highly respected Wing Chun master about a basic stance. He had practiced it for years, as had his master before him. It was considered fundamental to his style, something that every student was required to learn and perfect. When I asked him why this stance was used, he confidently told me, "This is the way it has been done for generations." That was his answer. Not because it had been tested and proven to be the best. Not because it had been refined through real combat experience, but simply because it had always been done that way. So I asked a different question. But what happens when I do this? And with a small adjustment, I countered his stance effortlessly. I broke through his foundation, disrupting his structure with almost no resistance. What he had trained for years to perfect was undone in an instant. He had no answer, because he had spent his entire life repeating movements without questioning if they actually worked. He had practiced the stance thousands of times, trusting that repetition alone would make it effective. But repetition is not proof. Repetition does not make something true. Truth is what survives questioning. If a technique cannot withstand scrutiny, if it crumbles when tested under real conditions, then no matter how many times it has been practiced, no matter how many generations have passed it down, it is not truth. It is merely a habit disguised as knowledge. This is the flaw in the way most people approach learning. They follow instructions without question. They seek validation through obedience rather than discovery. They mistake tradition for effectiveness and repetition for mastery. But real mastery requires courage. The courage to question what everyone else blindly follows. the willingness to tear down what does not work and rebuild something better. The ability to say, this may have been right before, but is it still right now? Because the truth is simple. You can repeat a flawed technique 1,000 times, and it will still be flawed. You can practice an ineffective stance for a lifetime, and it will still fail under real pressure. Repetition does not create truth. Truth is discovered through testing, breaking, and refining. And only those who have the courage to question will ever find it. Let me tell you a secret. Most of the limitations you believe in aren't real. They were never real. You weren't born with them. They weren't written in stone. They were taught to you by society, by tradition, by people who had already convinced themselves that certain things were impossible. And without even realizing it, you accepted their words as truth. People said you had to master one martial arts style before learning another, that you needed to dedicate years to one system before even considering a new approach. I asked why. Who made that rule? What law of physics or biology made this necessary? The answer was always the same: tradition. But tradition isn't proof. It's just a habit that has been passed down without question. So I ignored that rule, experimented for myself, blended different techniques, and discovered that the truth had nothing to do with loyalty to a single system. The truth was about what worked. They said building muscle would make you slow, that increasing strength would ruin agility, so I tested it. I studied the effects of strength training, experimented with different exercises, tracked my own speed before and after building muscle. And I proved that strength and speed were not opposites, but partners. The right kind of training didn't make me slower. It made me faster, more powerful, and more explosive than ever before. The limitation wasn't real. It was just a myth that had never been challenged. They said an Asian man could never be a Hollywood star, that no one would accept it, that the industry would never allow it, that the world wasn't ready. They told me to settle for side roles, background characters, small parts that fit the stereotype. But a limitation like that only exists if you believe in it. I refused. I didn't waste time arguing. I didn't ask for permission. I proved them wrong by making myself undeniable, by showing the world that talent, presence, and ability mattered more than race. The barrier they spoke of wasn't a real wall. It was just an idea that had gone unchallenged for too long. And once I shattered it, there was no going back. Limitations are not physical. They are stories people tell themselves to explain why they can't do something. They sound like absolute truths, but they're just assumptions. And once you realize that, you have the power to rewrite those stories. When someone tells me, "That's impossible," I ask, "Who says so?" Most of the time, they don't even know. They're just repeating what they've heard. Instead of accepting their words, I look for the real reason behind the supposed limitation. Is it truly impossible or just difficult? Is it a real law of nature or just a rule created by people? I break the limitation into parts, analyzing it piece by piece. I test each part in reality, not in theory, because reality is the only true judge of what works. And once I prove a limitation false, I discard it forever. That's exactly how I created the 1-inch punch. People said you couldn't generate knockout power from such a short distance. They claimed power required a full extension, that a punch needed a long, wide movement to be effective. I didn't argue. I tested physics, studied biomechanics, analyzed kinetic chains, and applied real-world force measurements. I proved that power wasn't about distance. It was about efficiency, leverage, and energy transfer. I refined every detail, stripped away every unnecessary motion, and perfected a technique that defied expectations. What others thought was a limitation was simply a lack of understanding. And that is the truth about most so-called limits. They only exist because people accept them without question. They are passed down as fact, but they are rarely tested, rarely challenged, rarely broken apart to see what's real and what's just assumption. The moment you stop accepting limits and start testing them for yourself, you will see how many of them crumble under scrutiny. The moment you stop believing in restrictions and start looking for possibilities, you will realize how much more is possible than you ever imagined. The only real limits are the ones you refuse to challenge. I used to know 300 techniques. I had spent years learning them, perfecting them, memorizing every movement, every variation, every detail. I believed that the more techniques I knew, the more powerful I would be. That if I had more options, more strategies, more ways to attack and defend, I would have an advantage in any fight. I was convinced that more knowledge meant more mastery. Then I got into a real fight. In that moment, under real pressure, when every second mattered, something unexpected happened. My mind didn't cycle through all 300 techniques. It didn't pull from the endless drills and rehearsals I had practiced for years. Instead, my body instinctively used just 4 techniques. Out of everything I had trained, out of all the moves I thought would make me unstoppable, only 4 actually worked. That was my awakening. I realized something that went against everything I had been taught. Mastery is not about adding more. Mastery is about eliminating everything unnecessary. Most people believe that to get better, they need to learn more. They think that progress means accumulating knowledge, collecting more techniques, memorizing more forms, mastering more variations. But the truth is, more doesn't make you better. More makes you slower. More makes you hesitate. More gives you too many choices when you need instant action. Real mastery isn't about knowing more. It's about knowing what actually works. That's when I developed what I call the subtraction method. First, you must learn everything. You have to explore, experiment, and gain experience with a wide range of skills. You must understand all the possibilities. But then comes the crucial step. You start eliminating. You strip away everything that doesn't hold up under real pressure, everything that slows you down, everything that adds complexity without adding effectiveness. You cut away the excess, the impractical, the inefficient. I applied this method to my own training. I went from 300 techniques to 50. Then I refined further, cutting it down to 20. And finally, I was left with only what was absolutely essential. What survived wasn't elegant. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't what looked the best in demonstrations or performances. But it was deadly effective. It worked in the real world. It worked when everything was on the line. It worked when there was no time to think, only time to react. This was the greatest lesson I ever learned about mastery. It applies not just to martial arts, but to every skill, every discipline, and every aspect of life. The more you refine, the more you strip away what doesn't serve you, the closer you get to true effectiveness. Because mastery isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what truly matters and discarding everything else. People say knowledge is power. They're wrong. Knowledge alone means nothing. It's just information, words on a page, ideas floating in your head. You can read 1,000 books, memorize every theory, listen to every expert, and still be powerless when it matters. Tested knowledge is power. Knowledge only becomes valuable when it is applied, when it is tested, when it survives the real world. Until then, it's just an opinion, a guess, an assumption waiting to be proven right or wrong. Martial arts was just my testing ground. It was never about learning techniques for the sake of learning. It was about understanding what actually works. Every punch, every kick, every movement had to be put to the test. If it failed under pressure, it was useless. If it crumbled in real combat, it didn't matter how many masters swore by it, how many centuries it had been passed down. It was still useless. But the real battle was not in the ring. It was in my mind. Because the same principle that applies to fighting applies to everything in life. What is untested remains uncertain. What is unchallenged remains weak. What is never put under pressure never proves its worth. In film, they told me that action had to be choreographed, that it had to follow a script, that every movement had to be pre-planned, rehearsed, and executed like a dance. But I asked, why? Who decided that action had to look a certain way? Who said the audience wouldn't respond to something more raw, more real? Instead of just following the industry standard, I tested what would happen when real combat principles were brought to the screen. The result? A revolution in action filmmaking. My movies didn't just entertain people, they made them feel the fight, made them believe in every strike, every movement, every moment of impact. Because it was tested, and it worked. In business, they told me that students needed a structured curriculum, that they had to follow a set path, memorize fixed techniques, progress through levels like climbing a ladder. But I asked, why? What if structure itself was the limitation? What if real mastery wasn't about adding knowledge, but about removing unnecessary complexity? So I built my own way of teaching. I made my students unlearn structure, to focus not on following a system, but on understanding the principles behind it. I told them to test everything, to discard what didn't work, to build their own path instead of following mine. And those who truly understood this lesson became unstoppable. In relationships, they said respect came from tradition. That respect was given because of hierarchy, because of age, because of societal roles. But I asked, why? Does respect come from blindly following rules, or does it come from truth? From understanding? From mutual strength and trust? I didn't build respect in my relationships by following what tradition dictated. I built it by being honest, by being direct, by showing strength and demanding the same in return. Because real respect isn't given, it's earned. The truth is simple. Real mastery applies everywhere. A principle that is truly true, one that has been tested, proven, and refined, works in any field, in any time, in any situation. If something is true in combat, it is true in business. If it is true in business, it is true in relationships. If it is true in one aspect of life, it is true in all aspects of life. That is why I never stopped questioning, never stopped testing, never accepted anything as true until it had survived reality. Because only what is tested, challenged, and proven holds any real power. Everything else is just an idea waiting to be broken. Here's what you must understand. In life, you have two choices. You can spend your entire existence copying others, following their footsteps, imitating their methods, and hoping that if you do exactly what they did, you'll achieve the same results. Or you can choose to become something no one has ever seen before, someone who doesn't just follow, but leads, who doesn't just accept, but questions, who doesn't just repeat, but reinvents. Most people spend their lives trying to be like their heroes. They study them, idolize them, copy their every move. They try to train the way they trained, think the way they thought, and live the way they lived. They believe that if they walk the same path, they will reach the same destination. But what they don't realize is that their heroes weren't great because they copied others. They were great because they dared to be different. Your true power does not lie in mimicking the past. It lies in becoming something greater than even your heroes imagined. It lies in taking what they built and pushing it further. It lies in questioning what they accepted, improving what they created, and discovering what they never saw. And that means you must question everything. Don't just learn. Question what you learn. Don't take information at face value. Ask yourself, is this true? Does this work? Can it be improved? Most people never ask these questions. They assume that if something has been taught for generations, it must be right. But history is filled with outdated beliefs that were once considered unbreakable truths. The only way to find real knowledge is to question everything you are told. Don't just train, test what you train. Repetition alone is not mastery. Just because you practice something over and over again does not mean it will work when it matters. Put it to the test, challenge it in reality, apply it in real conditions, against real opposition under real pressure. If it fails, discard it. If it works, refine it. This is the difference between blind repetition and true mastery. Don't just believe, prove it in reality. Beliefs mean nothing unless they stand up to real-world experience. Many people believe in techniques, in strategies, in ways of thinking that have never been tested. They hold on to these beliefs because they were taught by respected figures, because they feel comfortable, because they sound logical. But belief without proof is just another form of blindness. The only thing that matters is what works when it's needed most. Because the world is filled with people who know a lot, but understand nothing. They can recite facts, theories, and philosophies. They can talk endlessly about what should work, what might work, what has worked in the past. But when it comes time to apply that knowledge, when reality demands proof, they fail. They drown in their own theories, trapped in ideas they never tested, never questioned, never challenged. Don't be one of them. Be someone who doesn't just collect knowledge, but proves knowledge. Be someone who doesn't just follow, but leads. Be someone who doesn't just accept, but questions. Because the ones who question, the ones who challenge, the ones who refuse to accept limitations, they are the ones who change the world. Right now, you might feel like you've learned something new. You've heard ideas that challenge the way you think, words that inspire you, concepts that make you see things differently. You might even feel a spark of motivation, a sense that something inside you has shifted. But ask yourself, have you really learned something? Or have you just added more knowledge without proof? There's a difference between hearing an idea and understanding its truth. Knowledge by itself means nothing if it's not tested. You can listen to words of wisdom, memorize powerful lessons, and repeat them with confidence. But unless you apply them, question them, and see their results in the real world, they remain nothing more than words. They may sound profound, but they are unproven, untested, and uncertain. Most people walk away from learning experiences feeling inspired, but inspiration alone changes nothing. Inspiration fades, excitement fades. The only thing that lasts, the only thing that transforms, is action. If you want to be different, don't just walk away inspired. Walk away transformed. That means doing something most people will never do. I challenge you, take one thing, just one, that you believe to be true, something you've always accepted without question. It could be a belief about yourself, a belief about success, a belief about what is possible or impossible. Now test it ruthlessly. Don't just accept it because you've believed it for years. Don't just trust it because someone told you it was true. Challenge it. Push against it. Apply it to reality. See if it holds up when put under pressure. Does it break or does it survive? If it fails, discard it. If it cannot stand the test of reality, if it does not hold up when challenged, let it go, no matter how deeply you once believed in it. Holding on to falsehoods, to weak beliefs, to traditions that do not work. This is what keeps people trapped in limitation. This is what stops growth. But if it survives, if it proves itself true not just in theory but in reality, then you will have something real, something that cannot be shaken by doubt or defeated by questioning. That is where true strength begins. Because real mastery does not begin in books. Knowledge is only potential until it is tested. Real mastery does not begin in training. Training is only practice until it is applied under real conditions. Real mastery does not begin in tradition. Tradition is only repetition unless it is proven by experience. Real mastery begins in the relentless pursuit of truth. A truth that can withstand questioning. A truth that survives reality. A truth that remains even after everything false has been stripped away. And that pursuit, the pursuit of what is real, tested, and unbreakable, is the only path worth following. Now, my friend, the moment is yours. You have two choices, and this decision will shape everything that follows. You can walk away thinking you've learned something, feeling inspired, feeling like you've gained new knowledge. You can nod your head, agree with these ideas, and carry them with you as words in your mind. That's what most people do. They listen, they feel a moment of motivation, and then they return to their lives exactly as they were before, unchanged, unaffected, and still trapped by the same limitations they never questioned. Or you can apply this knowledge. You can take these lessons and put them to the test. You can break free from old patterns, challenge every belief you've ever held, and start becoming someone entirely new. You can stop simply knowing and start doing. Because the difference between those who transform their lives and those who stay the same isn't intelligence, talent, or luck. It's action. But here's what you must understand. You were never meant to be like me. Don't seek to copy me. Don't try to follow my exact path. The world doesn't need another version of me. It needs the greatest version of you. The version that is fearless, questioning, evolving, breaking every false barrier that has ever held you back. The highest version of you does not accept limits. It does not follow blindly. It does not wait for permission. It creates its own path, its own philosophy, its own way of mastering life. That's not just about martial arts. That's not just about success. That's about true freedom. The ability to think for yourself, to act with complete confidence, and to shape your own reality rather than accepting the one given to you. Now go. Test everything. Don't just believe what I've said. Prove it for yourself. Challenge it. Break it apart. Find the truth through your own experience. And in doing so, become something the world has never seen before.